evening, half a day. My name is Grace. I am one of the nurses at the SDA clinic, and I can't tell you what a privilege it is to work for an organization that cares so much about its community and provides programs for its health. And I'm also amazed to see how many people here in Guam are interested in their health and are showing up every night, so that is awesome. I would like to take a quick minute and tell you about another effective program that will be offered this week. It is called Diabetes Undone. It's an incredibly effective program that will be beneficial to so many of you. Have any of you heard of Dr. Wes Youngberg? Okay. He was a doctor here at SDA Clinic and the director of the Wellness Center there for 14 years. And while he was here, he also researched diabetes in the Micronesian Islands. Unfortunately, we live in an area of the world that is constantly in the top of the list for the highest rates of diabetes in the world. The Pacific Islands, Palau, Marshall Islands, and Guam are constantly at the top of the list. But starting 1 week from today, on Thursdays, we can help to reverse that. For 8 Thursdays, you can join us to learn from our video host, Dr. Wes Youngberg, and with cooking demonstrations and group support, you can join us on those Thursdays. And then at home, you'll take your workbook and an awesome recipe book and connect with your health partner to help support you between the meetings. So for just $10 a week, you can make lifestyle changes for your body, mind, and spirit. And in the interest of making that change, starting next Thursday, why don't you improve your work-life balance and not worry about making dinner for one night a week. And on Thursdays, just come straight from work and join us for a light supper. And then you can also learn how to undo diabetes. Let's learn more about that now.
You'll learn how to fight high blood sugars by addressing their underlying causes. I've seen hundreds of clients experience remarkable health improvements by following the same wellness strategies you'll learn in this course. Many of them are no longer diabetic. This course can also help type 1 diabetics to control the condition and prevent complications. Even better, the same strategies that fight diabetes also effectively combat heart disease, obesity, cancer, autoimmune disease, and many other health conditions. This course isn't just about diabetes. It's about experiencing optimal wellness in every area of your life, body, mind, and spirit. I'm confident that the strategies you'll learn will make a lasting impact in your life. So let's get started. Today is the first day of your new health story.
And I will be in the back by the Diabetes Undone sign for more information. Thank you for coming tonight, and if any of you haven't filled this out and you haven't won, please feel free to fill it out and put it in the bowl before the end of the night. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back. This is the final night of our 4-day series, our 4-night series, Get Your Life Back, with Dr. David DeRose, co-presented by his wife, or with his wife, Dr. Sonia DeRose. Hasn't it been a wonderful 3 nights so far? Haven't you enjoyed the lectures? I wish he could be here longer. Both he and his wife could be here longer. Well, you know what, just few reminders for those of you who've just walked in. Please silence your phones. We truly appreciate it. We are now going to go into our recipe demonstration. These are wellness recipes, and G. Lee and Kathy Robinson are going to be presenting these recipes with Dr. Sonia DeRose. So you'll get all the nutritional values of everything that they're going to be presenting. I wish we had samples for everybody, but that's another story, so we'll talk to you later about that. Just a reminder that our series, our Get Your Life Back series, is presented by the Guam SDA Clinic, where your health truly is our mission. And this outreach program is very, very much in line with what they do as a not-for-profit organization. The Guam SDA Clinic is a not-for-profit organization. Just wanted to remind all of you of that. They're always doing whatever they can, not just in Guam, to help communities, but also throughout the Marianas and Micronesia. So this is just one thing we do. We're doing this on Guam, but we do it on so many other islands as well. So let's go ahead and get straight to the recipe demo with G. Lee, Kathy Robinson, and Dr. Sonia DeRose.
Again. Today we have some delicious things at Kathy. What did you prepare for us today?
Tonight we are going to learn how to make a very easy granola. And we will be serving that with some chia seed pudding, and you're going to put together a parfait for us at the end.
Yes. So we're actually highlighting omega-3 today. And so let's watch as Kat prepares this delicious granola.
It looks like it's a lot of items up here, but it's very easy to put together because you just toss everything, pretty much everything, in a bowl. So we're going to start out by mixing our dry ingredients. And our dry ingredients for this granola will be 2 cups of rolled oats, old-fashioned oats, 2 cups of quick 1-minute oat, and half a cup of wheat germ. Actually, that's wheat germ, but it doesn't matter. And then half a cup of wheat germ, and we have also 1 teaspoon of salt. So tonight we're going to be using the pink salt. You know, Ross has a lot of pink salt.
Can you share with us the difference between the pink salt and the table salt, the benefits?
The main difference in the different kinds of salts are some of them have minerals, some other minerals in with it. Salt is, pardon me, salt is still salt. So just because it's pink Himalayan or black Himalayan or sea salt doesn't mean that you can eat more of it because it's special. Okay. So it's still, but it does have other not vitamins, but other minerals in it that can be helpful. So.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So after the salt, we will be adding half a cup of sucanut, which is basically coconut sugar.
That's not as refined as the typical sugars as well.
So sugar is sugar as well.
But sugar is sugar, better. Yes. Your body still treats it like sugar, so you still, even if it's a, quote, healthy sugar, you still want to use it sparingly, just because your body will still treat it.
All right, and then last we have the flax meal. I use golden flax meal. I believe there are 2 different, you have the golden one and then you have the
The brown.
brown one? Yeah.
The golden one tastes a little smoother, I think, than the brown one. Tastes a little more bitter. And just to share, as you know, what do you think has the highest amount of omega-3 out there, and even compared to, no comparison. So we're talking about per 1 ounce, 6,388 versus the next in line. Do you know what's next after flaxseed? The chia, and third comes the walnuts. So we have actually omega-3 paradise today, as we do have our chia seed pudding as well coming after this.
And, that's what I was trying to accomplish here, is to kind of show people how to make a very healthy breakfast. The other day I forgot to eat breakfast, and my body kind of like went all out of whack. I was hungry, and then I wanted sugar, and anyways, or something sweet. I think my sugar level dropped. And so I realized how important it is to eat a good breakfast. And I think Dr. DeRose said that as well.
Very, very important.
Yes. And then what else do we have? Oh, we have unsweetened coconut flakes. Now, folks, here in Guam we have a lot of coconuts, so
Not at my house.
No, but you could drive down south and there's a lot on the road. So I use fresh coconut flakes. You can, they have dehydrated ones as well. You can use that. And then last are the nuts. So today will be, for this particular one that I already cooked, I didn't have walnuts at home, so I just used whatever nuts I had in the cabinet, like mixed nuts. So I just threw that in there. But today we'll be using about, what is that, half a cup? Half a cup of nuts, okay? And these are halves, so you might want to just kind of crush them with your hand like so.
So if you're anything like my husband, he doesn't really like walnuts, so you can sub other nuts as well. And another thing that you can do if your children don't like chewing on nuts, you can blend it. And once you blend it, it adds a really nice texture of crunch, added crunch to the granola. So if you have anybody that does not like to chew on nuts, you can go ahead and put it through the food processor to do that.
Yeah. I give it to my daughter. I blend strawberry, soy milk, and nuts, and you can't even taste the nuts. So that's another option, yes. Okay, and then, so now that we have all the dry, we're going to toss it, and we're going to put the wet ingredients, which contains half a cup of water, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and a 1/3 cup of oil, canola oil. I'm using canola oil. You can use coconut oil if you want.
And actually, when you use a coconut oil, I think it really brings a nicer aroma to it. So I prefer to use a coconut oil. I've tried it both ways with canola and coconut, and I prefer the coconut flavor.
And then you just drizzle that on top, and then you want to mix it as you're drizzling it. And it's supposed to be hot water, okay? I believe it's 1 cup hot water there. So once you have all that incorporated in the bowl, you're going to put it on the pan here, and then you're just going to press it down and bake it at 325 for about 20 minutes. Usually when it's nice and brown on the sides, then you know it's done. So there you go. Very easy. Like I said, easy granola. You just press it down like so, put it in the oven, and 20 minutes later, you are done. All right.
So if you can observe the granola that's here, you see that there's a lot of chunky pieces. And some people like it that way, but if you like it flakier, of course, then you won't press it down as much. And maybe in the middle, you might want to lift it and stir it around. Mm-hmm. But our family likes the chunky version because it's hard to snack on flaky vanilla granola. You drop half of it on the floor while you're trying to sneak a handful in your mouth. So we prefer the chunky granola.
All right, so there you go. That's your granola. And then the chia seed pudding is actually very easy. And the ratio is usually about for me at least, it's about a tablespoon of chia seeds and about 1/4 cup of coconut milk. And that's what I use today is coconut milk. And if you want it, so you're going to get this type of consistency here. Hold on, let me just lift it for you. So it's going to look kind of like this, all right? And today, I made like a fruit bowl. So with, kind of like a tropical fruit bowl, I have here pineapple, local papaya, mango, and chia seeds in the middle. And there you have a very healthy breakfast, and you can top it with some granola, nuts, and bananas if you want. For a very healthy breakfast, I believe we should have nuts, helps the brain, and potassium as well. You can get that from bananas. Very good for the muscles. Is there anything else you can tell us about having the proper nutrients in the morning to get our brain and muscles going?
Well, what you've been making here this evening is a perfect way to start your day. Granola with all these wonderful things, walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds. It's brain food on steroids.
Yes, there you go.
And then with some good fruit with it, some, you've got the nuts, maybe some soy milk to go on or almond milk or whatever to go on the granola, and you are set for the day, for a good part of the day.
Okay.
It's delicious. Chia seeds, they are so, flax too.
Yeah.
They're so just powerfully packed with nutrients. 1 gram of chia seeds has 11 grams of fiber.
Okay. Wow.
So there's 12 grams of carbs, but 11 of those carbs are fiber.
Wonderful.
It has 4 grams of protein, 9 grams of fat, 5 of which are omega-3 fats. And it also has 30% of the daily needs for manganese and magnesium, 27% of phosphorus, and 18% of calcium in 1 gram. 1 ounce. So 28 grams, 1 ounce of chia seeds. That's like, 2 tablespoons or something.
Okay, wonderful.
So it's just super rich.
Well, with the ingredients that she has already cooked, Kathy has already cooked deliciously for us, all I did was just make a little chia seed jam. This is pretty much strawberries that are blended in your Vitamix that are semi-defrosted. And then to that, I just add a little bit of lemon juice, a little bit of salt, and a sweetener. Now, what I like to do with a sweetener is I sweeten it partially, not so sweet, with honey or agave. Maple syrup is probably a better alternative. And then in the end, I add a stevia packet. So stevia is a leaf that they made into, so it's a healthier version that's better than having those artificial.
Definitely, way better, because it's a whole food actually. It's made from the leaf, or at least much less refined, at least than I should say than other sweeteners, and it's not artificial. So you have to be careful though. Stevia is super sweet. It blows everything else out of the water for sweetness. So don't put too much in or you will not be able to eat it.
So you definitely don't want to put in a lot. So put in a little bit of a sprinkle at a time until you achieve your desired sweetness level. And then this is the same pudding that we had for the base, and we're going to make it into a dessert by adding this and then the strawberry. And I thickened it with chia seeds. So that's a really nice way to thicken your smoothies or anything like that. So even this is already melted, it's already thickened. And so I'm going to add the Guam frozen blueberries, which are a little less expensive than the fresh blueberries. But if you have the money, please indulge in a fresh blueberry. We're just topping the top with this jam, which is this blended fruit and blueberries. And then we're going to top it off with your delicious granola.
That looks like a perfect breakfast to bring your loved one morning.
So one thing
you want to be romantic? Look at that, beautiful.
Oh yeah. One thing I love about healthy desserts is that unlike unhealthy desserts, there is no guilt after you eat it. You feel really good, and you're so happy that you just gave yourself a lot of nutrients that your brain is happy after you're done eating. So I just wanted to show you with the same ingredients, you can make yourself a beautiful dessert. Okay?
And the chia seed, because it has so much fiber in it, it can hold 10 to 12 times its weight in water. It swells up 10 to 12 times its size with water. So it also is good for filling you up with few calories. So it can be helpful with weight loss. And it's just packed with nutrients, lots of antioxidants in it. Besides all the other good things we've been talking about, it's truly a superfood.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. So I'm going to miss you all, and I'm going to miss you too. It's our last night. So please, with this You guys have seen a lot of chia seed pudding in a lot of the cafes, right? It's very expensive. You can make this for half, quarter of the cost at home. So please try it at home. Such an easy recipe. And like I said in the previous nights, just let us know, give us your email if you want this recipe, and we'll be more than happy to give it to you. Thank you. And
Just to mention about that is that as you're leaving, if you want all the recipes that were given during this seminar, then please leave your email with us and just specify that you would like all the recipes, and we will be happy to make sure that all the recipes of what we've demonstrated here will be sent to you by email. Okay? Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Good evening, good evening. It's great to see each one of you here. My name is Tim Arakawa. I'm the Medical Director of Executive Services at the Guam SCA Clinic. And so we want to welcome each one of you here. So do you know what that means? I take care of a lot of people with diabetes. That's what I do all day long. In fact, I think I see some of my patients here in the audience. So what's my favorite topic? Diabetes. So I'm really excited to be here. In fact, my blood pressure might be a little bit high. I think I need to go get that book now about how to lower your blood pressure. So really looking forward to this. You all know Dr. DeRose by now. You know, he writes a lot of books. He's a radio host. I've known him for many, many years. I actually went to the same internal medicine residency as him a few years later. So when we invited him here, that was one of the big things I first thought of. Oh, Dr. DeRose would be perfect for diabetes, for blood pressure. That's what we need to hear about, right? All right, just a couple more reminders. Remember to put your phones on silent or vibrate so that we aren't distracted. Also remember that we still are going to have a drawing after the main presentation and after the Q&A. So if you haven't filled out the survey and you want to get it into that bowl, especially if you haven't won yet, then go ahead and do that because there's a lot of great books and things being given away. You don't want to miss that. All right, then let's get ready to hear Dr. DeRose. Thank you.
Welcome to each of you. It's good to see you for our final night. And we are so excited because we are speaking tonight about something that really is relevant to every single one of us. Perhaps you've heard the saying, what you don't know can't hurt you. What do you think? Is it true? You know, a lot of people live like this is true, and so they're not here tonight because they were afraid they might learn something that would require them to change their lifestyle. But I have to tell you the story of Sam Ballard. Sam was actually a strapping rugby player in Australia, 19 years of age. We featured his story in our book, The Methuselah Factor. Sam was just relaxing with his friends when a garden slug made its way across the patio. You know how boys are, young men. They can sometimes dare each other to do some things that may not be, all that wise. His friends challenged Sam to eat the slug. Sam did it. He's a tough guy, right? How's a little slug going to hurt a healthy young man? But after eating that slug, it was not all that long before Sam started not feeling right. And as his health deteriorated, he finally ended up in the hospital. He ultimately ended up on a ventilator in a coma, diagnosed with something called rat lungworm infection. The infection had gone to his brain. Over a year later, Sam woke from the coma, a paraplegic. No, it was terrible. Some 8 years later, he died. What you don't know can hurt you. But it's not only infectious diseases, that this is true of, but it's also true of chronic diseases. We began this series speaking about the Methuselah Factor, about Longevity Plus. Many of you were there on Monday night. Many of you picked up the video that went along with the presentation. Others of you have purchased the book, The Methuselah Factor. That program, that 30-day program that's outlined in the book, is designed to help you avoid a host of things that may not even be on your radar screen, things you're totally oblivious to that are happening to you metabolically. And I tell you this because it's relevant for what we're speaking about tonight. For tonight we are in the midst of another epidemic. It is largely a silent epidemic for many, many of us. We don't know we have this condition, but you've already told me what we don't know, what? Can indeed hurt us. The epidemic that we're in the midst of is something called the metabolic syndrome, sometimes also called Syndrome X, also sometimes referred to as the insulin resistance syndrome. This condition is increasing our risk of things as diverse as diabetes, heart disease, abnormal blood fats, that's what we call dyslipidemia in medical circles, high blood pressure, cancer, and infertility, all being caused by something that's afflicting many of us totally unbeknownst to us. But tonight, you're going to actually find out whether you have the metabolic syndrome or not. Isn't this encouraging? We're going to actually help you know whether or not you have the condition. How many of you would like to know? Some of you aren't sure. I mean, this doesn't sound like all that good. We're talking about the problems with stress. Let me just show you, first of all, if you do have the condition, you're in good company. It's the majority of the U.S. population, once we've reached into our 60s, that have the condition. You can see even in those in their 20s and 30s, as many as 1 in 5 with the metabolic syndrome. So we're going to give you a quiz tonight to find out if you have the metabolic syndrome. It is a 5-question quiz. 5 questions. Now, I can see some of you, you're hearing quiz, you're highly academically driven. Even though some of you, it may have been a few years since you were in school, you want to do well on quizzes, right? You're still that way. When you were a kid, you wanted to get 100%, right? Others of you are saying, I don't even know what that is. I never saw such a score. Well, let me tell you, this quiz, the best score is 0. 5 out of 5 is the worst score you can get. Now, I hope you're all paying attention, because it would be really embarrassing if we go through this whole quiz for you to jump up and say, I just got 5 out of 5. Okay? So if you get 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5, or 5 out of 5, you meet the criteria for the metabolic syndrome. You got it? So 3 points or more, you have the metabolic syndrome. Let's do the quiz together. Do you have 3 or more of these? The first question relates to your waist size, your waist circumference. If you are a man and it is greater than 40 inches, you get a point. If you're a woman and it's greater than 35 inches, you get a point. Now, there's a danger in putting up this graphic, because I know there's someone sitting here in this audience, or at least a good chance, that you're saying, I am so glad I can still wear that belt that I had when I was in high school. But there's a large amount hanging out over the belt, okay? So waist circumference is not the size of your belt. It's the size of the largest dimension around the middle, which usually is at the level of the navel, okay? So that's the first one. Some of you have already gotten a point. Others of you haven't. You see there, if you're of Asian descent, the criteria are even a bit stricter. Now, some of you are looking at this and you're saying, this looks like a racially and gender-biased survey. It's not racially and gender biased. It's just looking at the reality of the body composition in different populations and different genders, okay? So take it with that in mind, and this is based on large population groups. Sure, there could be exceptions, but this is a good rule of thumb. Question number 2 is dependent on your fasting triglyceride level. Now, some of you know your triglycerides. If they're running 150 or above, you get a point. Others of you are saying, I don't think I've ever had my triglycerides measured. So what should you do? That's right. You should give yourself a point until you know that they're not 150 or above. No, really. I mean, you're not doing yourself a favor to say, well, I don't know anything, so I must be pretty good. I don't know my blood pressure. I've never measured my waist. I mean, people say that I look about twice the size I used to, but I never measure my waist circumference. Okay? So this doesn't really cut it. Now, others of you are saying, I am so glad I'm taking all those medications for my blood fats because my triglycerides used to be 1,000, but now they're down to 147. Well, if you're taking medication for your triglycerides, you also get a point, okay? So whether you have high triglycerides or if you're treating your high triglycerides with medications, you get a point. Here's number 3, and that is HDL. So HDL is the so-called good cholesterol. It is basically cholesterol that is being carried away from your blood vessels and vital organs and being sent to the liver where it is disposed of. That's why it's often called good, because the cholesterol is being eliminated from places where you don't want it. If you're a man and your HDL is below 40, you get a point. A woman below 50, you get a point. So we've gone through 3 questions. Some of you have already answered in the affirmative to all 3. What does that mean? That's right. It means you have the metabolic syndrome. Others of you are saying, well, I've only got 1 or 2, and you're sitting on the edge of your seat. What are the rest of the criteria? Well, the next one is blood pressure. And blood pressure, if you have a systolic number 130 or above, or a diastolic number 85 or above, you get a point. Now, for those of you who were here last night, true or false, 130 systolic is an optimal blood pressure reading. That is false. We learned last night, if you weren't here, we looked at the data on blood pressure, and we found that ideal blood pressures are 112 or below. That's what the research indicates. And that is if you're not taking medications. So we looked at natural ways you could lower your blood pressure last night. If you're doing that and you've gotten your blood pressure down below 130 over 85, you don't get a point if you're lowering your blood pressure naturally. But if you're taking a medication, 1 or more medications to lower your blood pressure, even if it's below 130 over 85, if you were not taking that medication, it would be higher, you get a point. Do you see how it works? Okay, because we're looking at your metabolism. We're not looking at how well you're taking pills. You understand? That's what this is a quiz looking at. So number 5, the number 5 question has to do with fasting blood sugar. If your fasting blood sugar runs at 100 or above, you get a point. Okay, so this is the set of criteria for the metabolic syndrome. Since we're going to be speaking in some detail about blood sugar, what is 100 the cutoff for? Do any of you know? Is that a diabetic blood sugar? If you have a fasting blood sugar of 105, does that meet the criteria for diabetes? It doesn't. It doesn't. 126 is where we make the diagnosis of diabetes based on a fasting blood sugar. Well, what is 100 then? Is that the criteria for anything? Yes, it's the criteria for pre-diabetes or impaired fasting glucose. It's a metabolic indicator that your body is not processing sugar optimally. So if you've got 3 or more of these, you've got the metabolic syndrome. If you don't know your HDL, if you don't know your fasting glucose, what are you supposed to do? I recommend give yourself a point. Now, if this really depress you to have 5 out of 5 just because you don't know 3 of the answers and you want to be easy on yourself, just make an appointment to see your doctor and get things checked out, okay? Before you get all stressed and lay awake at night. We don't want you leaving these programs distressed. But what causes this metabolic syndrome? It's so important because if we understand what causes it, we can treat it. And you're going to see that by understanding the metabolic syndrome, we can understand how to treat the majority of cases of diabetes. By the way, have some of you heard that there is a program that's going to be offered in Ghana dealing with diabetes? Have you heard anything about this tonight? What did you learn? Okay. Diabetes Undone. That program is going to be offered. When does it start? May 2nd, is that true? Have they got this? May 2? And how does someone take part in it? They sign up. Where do they sign up? Right outside here. So you can sign up for the Diabetes Undone program. It's a very good program. I've actually reviewed the program. We're collaborating some in our work with Native Americans, with Dr. Wes Youngberg, who many of you know, worked for many years here in Guam. So this program is going to be available here in Guam. The other option you've got for programs, so we're not going to tell you you've got to join the Diabetes Undone program, because you've also got another program coming up on Sundays that the Guam SDA Clinic is offering. And that will be starting Sunday at 4 p.m. Have I finally got this right? And we want to encourage you to do one of these follow-up programs. Now, some of you said, well, I've come all 4 nights. This has taken a big enough chunk out of my time. But really, what I'm trying to encourage you with is don't wait until you have problems to get serious. We've seen this so many times. In fact, if you picked up a copy of our book, 30 Days to Natural Blood Pressure Control, we start out with some stories about real people. And one of those stories is about someone who neglected to get serious about their high blood pressure and ended up basically having a stroke and dying. True story. The point is, don't wait until you have irreversible problems to get serious about your health. So I commend all of you for being here tonight. We're going to give you pointers tonight that can make a difference in your life. But I'm encouraging you, because you've got great resources right here on Guam, take advantage of them now before you end up in the hospital with irreversible complications. So let's come back to the topic, the metabolic syndrome. What causes it? The metabolic syndrome is driven by something called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance. And we're going to look at some of the basics of insulin resistance. So let's talk about insulin a little bit. Insulin is a hormone that is necessary for life. Can you live without insulin? You actually cannot. Okay, so the absence of insulin is incompatible with life. That's why it was such a breakthrough years ago when insulin was discovered and isolated, and people who needed insulin could be given insulin. In those days, it was largely people who had what we call type 1 diabetes. That's a diabetes that occurs from destruction of the pancreas. The pancreas can no longer make insulin, and they require insulin injections or insulin delivered in some other way. So insulin is a hormone necessary for life. The problem is, insulin resistance often occurs in our world today. Sonia, my wife, Dr. Sonia DeRose, mentioned last night the analogy we like to use with insulin in the body's tissues. Now, if you go to Diabetes Undone, Dr. Youngberg uses a little different variation on this, but I like to use insulin as the doorkeeper to the doors of your cells, the doorman. So when insulin comes to the doors of your cells, insulin opens those cells and allows sugar to go from your blood into your tissues. Insulin resistance is when those doors don't respond appropriately to insulin. The doorman is pulling on the door and it's not opening. What would you do if you had a door in your house that you had to get through, you were trying to open it, but the hinges were so bad, you were having trouble opening it? What would you do? What? You'd call for help. That's precisely what the body does. It sends another doorkeeper there. It sends more insulin to open the door. So the doors are getting more resistant to opening, and your pancreas responds by making more insulin. So this is what happens in the scenario of insulin resistance. So it starts with the insulin resistance. The pancreas produces more insulin. The insulin receptors, though, unless you change your lifestyle, tend to become more and more resistant. Then, if you are genetically predisposed, your pancreas will fatigue and no longer be able to make the insulin necessary, and you will be diagnosed with diabetes because you can't move the sugar out of your bloodstream. Now, I say if you're genetically predisposed, some people have amazing pancreases, and they can have all kinds of things that set them up, and they have extreme insulin resistance. We can actually measure it in different ways. So they have profound insulin resistance, but they don't have diabetes. How could that be? Help me out. How could that be based on what we're talking about? Their pancreas is pumping out huge amounts of insulin. I'll just tell you, one of the things that increases insulin resistance is obesity. I remember a patient that came to one of our medical centers where I was working. He weighed 668 pounds. He was not 12 feet tall. Okay? He was a pretty tall guy. He was over 6 foot, but he was really heavy. How many of you think he had diabetes? Those of you who thought he had diabetes, it's a great guess. But he didn't. He did not have diabetes. But he had extreme insulin resistance. But his pancreas was producing huge amounts of insulin. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to continue to do that for the rest of his life. But if he doesn't change something, and his pancreas kept pumping out that level of insulin, would he be a blessed man or a cursed man? That's the question. You see, sometimes when disease comes knocking at our door, we think we're cursed. We say, well, why? I'm living a lot healthier than that next door neighbor. I'm a lot thinner than them. I exercise. I eat better. How come I'm having this problem? And they could care less about anything, and they seem to be perfectly healthy. It does not seem fair. Have you ever thought about that? Here's the interesting thing. Disease can be a wake-up call. Disease can actually save your life. True story. 2 women came to a health center where I was working some years ago. They were both there at the same time, made an indelible impression on my mind. Both of them had the disease that we're talking about tonight, diabetes. Both of them had type 1 diabetes. They had developed it in childhood. As I talked with these 2 women who were both in their 70s, they had an amazingly similar story. Because each of them, believe it or not, had outlived everyone in their family, including all the people that didn't have diabetes. You say, well, how could that be? Because these 2 ladies, instead of looking at diabetes as a curse, looked at it as a challenge to live a healthier lifestyle. So I could imagine it. When they had that party and all the cake and the ice cream and everyone's eating it. Oh, poor Susie, she can't have all the cake and ice cream. She's got diabetes. Poor girl. And what are you doing, Susie? It's cold outside. Well, I've got to exercise to keep my... Oh, that's so terrible. It is so cold outside. I mean, it's 50 degrees out. I mean, that's cold in Guam, isn't it? Okay, but my point is these ladies, instead of the disease being a curse, it turned out to be a blessing because they got serious about taking care of their health. So here's where we're going with this. The metabolic syndrome in and of itself is dangerous. And if something doesn't get your attention, like a lecture or some educational material like we're talking about tonight, you're liable to be doing severe damage to your body and not even know it. So why should you care if you have the metabolic syndrome? Well, here's some reasons why you should care. Now, most people, when I put up a slide like this, they would say, what is this talking about? Researchers have found that when you have more insulin resistance, when you have the metabolic syndrome, it raises levels of a host of risk factors for heart disease that are mostly never measured. You'll see things on this list like fibrinogen and plasma viscosity. Some of you, though, have seen these risk factors before. Who has seen some of these before? Where do you remember seeing them? That's right. Some of you were here Monday night. These are factors that affect blood fluidity. And if you want to have optimal blood fluidity, you want to avoid the metabolic syndrome. You want insulin to work the way it should in your body. Are you following along with me? So the metabolic syndrome sets you up for all kinds of complications, including heart attack. It also makes your conventional risk factors worse. So if you have the metabolic syndrome, you may have guessed, it tends to lower your HDL. It tends to raise your triglycerides. It tends to make your bad cholesterol more damaging to your body. So all of these things happen under the influence of insulin resistance. So some of you are saying, I'm sure glad I only got 2 out of those 5 questions right. I don't have the metabolic syndrome. So you're thinking maybe if DeRose just turns his back, I can slip out because this is all irrelevant to me. He's talking about metabolic syndrome and diabetes. I don't have either one. Well, before you pat yourself on the back and think you can tune out, even 1 or 2 components of the metabolic syndrome, even 1 or 2 of these questions, if you answered them in the affirmative, are dramatically increasing your risk of both heart attack and diabetes. The research indicates these indicators of suboptimal metabolism are important and we need to address them. The more of those factors present, the more of those 5 questions you answered yes to, the greater your risk of heart attack and diabetes. Let's look at some research that bears this out. This was a study done some years ago in Europe, the west of Scotland, coronary prevention study. Over 6,500 men were studied. Followed them for about 5 years. And what you see here in these graphics, one is that I can be very effective in flipping the slides so quickly that you can't read them. But the other thing is that if we actually pay attention to one of the slides, you'll notice this. This first one is looking at your score on that 5-question quiz. And it's looking at the likelihood of having coronary heart disease, CHD. What you look and you see, even just answering one of those questions, yes, increases your risk of heart disease by about 80%. You over double your risk if you had 2 of the 5 questions answered yes to. But then as you get into the metabolic syndrome, you're tripling or quadrupling your risk of heart disease. The data is even more sobering when it comes to diabetes risk. Even just one of those questions answered yes to over doubles your risk of developing diabetes. This is over a course of 5 years, so this is not a long, long time. 2 of those questions in the affirmative over a 4-fold risk. And then you can see here, if you have the metabolic syndrome, it dramatically 7-fold, 8-fold, 10-fold, 20-fold increased risk of developing diabetes. So the point is we should all be concerned about trying to have optimal insulin sensitivity. That's another way of saying we want to avoid insulin resistance. Are we all on the same page? Okay, I see some of you nodding your heads. But others of you are saying, oh, come on, is this really all that important? Well, it really is. Let me just tell you a little bit more about pre-diabetes. So that's an indicator also of the metabolic syndrome. And pre-diabetes really sets you up for full-blown diabetes. If you have pre-diabetes today, the likelihood of developing full-blown diabetes in the next year is over 10%. If we follow you up in 10 years, if you do nothing differently, over a 50% chance that you'll have diabetes. So we don't want to spend too much time with this, just making a point that this stuff is something you want to address, and there is good news. And that is that lifestyle changes can reverse the insulin-resistant process. Lifestyle changes can help you prevent prediabetes from going on to diabetes. And 2 of the key lifestyle factors are, guess what? Nutrition is involved. Exercise. That's right, nutrition, exercise, and weight reduction. So even though there are medications available that can slow the progression of prediabetes to diabetes, in the initial research, there was no medication as powerful as lifestyle. So why should you show up at the SDA clinic on Sunday at 4 p.m.? Did you hear what was going to happen there? They're going to be exercising with you. They're going to be serving you healthy food. They'll be helping you lose weight if you need to lose weight. And interestingly, if you get on a healthy lifestyle, if you need to gain weight, you'll often tend to gain weight. Isn't that amazing? So you get on a healthy lifestyle and it tends to normalize your weight. How much exercise does it take to achieve some of these benefits. Look at this. It's just 30 minutes a day of moderate physical activity. There is no better way to do this than to do it with other people. Really, that's what the research shows. If you do things with other people, that reinforces those behaviors. Now, I'll be honest with you. Although I enjoy exercising with my wife, we often do exercise together, but many times we're traveling, we're in different places, and I still exercise on my own. Make it a daily habit to get physical activity. It will help you in so many ways. So look here too at weight reduction. Some of you might say, well, what's the point? I weigh 300 pounds, and my ideal weight, I looked at the chart, you say just the other day, it's 180. You don't have to get down to 180 to get these benefits. It's small weight changes that can have profound benefits. So if you go from 300 pounds down to 275, how much have you lost, percentage-wise? You've lost nearly 10% of your body weight, right? To go from 300 to 275. You went down to 270, that would be 10%, a 30-pound decrease starting at 300. That is enough to dramatically decrease the likelihood of developing diabetes. That 30 pounds, and you say, that's a lot of weight. But you want to know something crazy? Many people today will eat 100 calories on this very day without thinking much about it. Over the course of a year, 100 calories adds up to 10 pounds. And you say, Dr. DeRose, but that's not 30 pounds. Do you realize most people are progressively gaining weight over time? If you can just go in the opposite direction, you can prevent disease. I mean, it's amazing when you just think about this. You can make a difference by the choices you make. Let me just tell you a few other reasons why you want to be concerned about this. And one of the other reasons is cancer and also a major cause of infertility are also connected with insulin resistance. Let's first talk about the polycystic ovary syndrome. This affects as many as 1 in 5 women. If you are a woman of childbearing age and has been longing to have a child but are really struggling, then one of the things that you need to consider is addressing insulin resistance. Go to one of these programs that's coming up. Pick up some of the resources that we've had here. And a lot of people say, well, Dr. DeRose, if you had a book on diabetes, I'd buy it. Well, the principles in our Methuselah Factor book, the principles in our blood pressure book, believe it or not, they help diabetes as well. So you go through some of these materials, but if you want to get the most bang for your buck, what are you going to do? That's right, you're going to do things with other people, okay? Now some of you think, well, Dr. DeRose, you must be getting a kickback. Everyone that pays, money for these programs, they're going to send money back to California, and you're probably planning to buy, a new yacht or something. Well, first of all, I don't have an old yacht, just to set the record straight. But the point is, this is not a money-making strategy. I don't get a penny from anything you guys do here in Guam, okay? So just put you at ease. I'm not, not here doing some sophisticated or unsophisticated sales pitch, depending on what you think it is. I'm trying to encourage you to do what the research says that will make the biggest difference in your life, and it's connecting with other people on a regular basis, taking an interest in your health. Now, I know there's got to be other options in Guam. If you're connected with a group that's motivated to their health, if you're part of a faith community that takes an interest in their health, that is invaluable. There is so much research on faith communities. If they take an interest in health and they're promoting the health of their faith community members, this is powerful too. So I'm not saying you've only got 2 options, but I'm saying if you're not already doing something, here's 2 great options. You don't have an excuse. If I come back here in a year and you say, Dr. DeRose, oh, I loved your lectures last year, but I got diabetes even after coming to your lectures. I said, well, what did you do based on my lectures? Well, I bought your books and DVDs. And I'll say, well, great. So how did you like them? Well, I've just been really busy. I really, since you're back here, it really, has reminded me, I got to read those books and watch those DVDs. Listen, save your money. Just go to one of the classes where they're going to show some of my DVDs or Dr. Youngberg's video material, and you'll have real live people walking with you, working with you, helping you. Doesn't that sound like a good strategy? Some of you think I'm belaboring this too much, but really, everything that I'm going to talk with you about tonight If you don't do it, it won't help you a bit. Okay, beside polycystic ovary syndrome that is associated with the metabolic syndrome, we have cancers. Cancers that are killing thousands and thousands of people, partly due to impaired glucose tolerance, insulin resistance. You say, why is that? A lot of people don't understand this, but insulin is not only a hormone necessary for life, but insulin in excess is what we call a trophic hormone. Insulin promotes growth. Some people who are on insulin make this connection immediately. They say, Dr. DeRose, I weighed 250 pounds. I had diabetes. I was put on insulin and I ballooned up to 300 pounds. Why? Insulin promotes growth. It also promotes the growth of cancers. So when you have higher insulin levels in your body than you need, you're feeding cancer-causing processes. There's compelling linkages in the research between colon cancer and the metabolic syndrome. Compelling linkages between breast cancer and higher blood sugar and insulin levels. Endometrial cancer, cancer of the womb, cancer of the pancreas, cancer of the liver, cancer of the prostate. You say, come on now, how could all these things be related? Let me just give you one example. This is a study from Finland of nearly 2,000 men. They're looking at their risk of prostate cancer. They're going to follow them for 13 years. None of them had cancer at the beginning of the study. None of them had diabetes. But they looked at whether or not they had the metabolic syndrome. Those with the metabolic syndrome, about 1 in 5, had nearly a doubling of risk of developing prostate cancer. And as the researchers looked at it, it could not be explained by anything else. There was nothing else they could explain the linkage other than this metabolic abnormality of having higher insulin levels because of greater insulin resistance. In fact, as they looked at it, they concluded this: our findings raised the possibility that the treatment or prevention of the metabolic syndrome may be a way to decrease the risk of prostate cancer. So some of you men here tonight, some of you ladies who are concerned about breast cancer, you may never develop diabetes. You may have good pancreases. Even if you've got lots of insulin resistance, you will not develop diabetes. But if you have more insulin resistance than you need, you will be increasing your risk of serious cancers. I mean, isn't this sobering? So the key message tonight is that this syndrome X, this metabolic syndrome, is bad. And we can actually do something about it. That's where we're going, because insulin resistance is largely reversible. So here is this is the most important slide for tonight, okay? So we've been talking about the results of insulin resistance. And you see them listed on the right side of the slide. We've been talking about heart disease. That's atherosclerosis. We've talked about the low HDL, how the good cholesterol tends to be depressed when you have insulin resistance. How triglycerides tend to rise. And by the way, triglycerides are not only a risk factor for cardiovascular problems, but high triglycerides can cause pancreatitis, a serious inflammation of your pancreas that actually can contribute to loss of insulin-producing capacity and other things. If you survive the pancreatitis, if it's really bad, you can even die from it. So high triglycerides are a risk for that condition as well. High triglycerides impair blood fluidity. They hurt your Methuselah factor. So as we're looking at insulin resistance, we're going down this list. It's kind of a review of a lot of the things we've been talking about this week. You see high blood pressure on the list. You see type 2 diabetes. We've talked about the connection with cancer, and we've also talked about the polycystic ovary syndrome and infertility. But now the good news is what's on the left side of the graphic. These are the things that contribute to insulin resistance. I say it's good news because you can change some of these things. How many of you can change your age or genetics? Not really. I mean, there are some techniques where they're trying to address some of these genetic problems. There's been some early success with certain single gene problems. There are some diseases and conditions that are caused by single genes, but there's also been some tragic outcomes from some of this research. So we can't really change our genetics effectively, but we can change how our genes are activated, whether they're turned on or off. And that has to do with lifestyle. The science is called epigenetics. You can turn genes on and off by your lifestyle, and that's where we're going with the rest of the list. So there are some drugs and diseases that contribute to insulin resistance. Some of those drugs you could stop using if you improve your health. Some of the drugs used for blood pressure actually increase your risk of diabetes. Are you aware of that? Some of the drugs, actually the most common drugs used for cholesterol, increase your risk of diabetes. So if you can naturally treat these other conditions, you can get off the drugs working with your primary care provider or specialist, whoever's prescribing the drug, and you may be able to decrease your risk of the complications of insulin resistance. What about poor diet? We're going to talk more about diet tonight. Trimming down, we've been seeing, can help you, and it doesn't take a huge amount of weight decrease to make a difference. Inactivity, being more active, can make a huge difference. Activity has an insulin-like effect. When you exercise, that helps to move sugar into your tissues. Poor sleep. I was talking with several groups of physicians in 2 different venues over the last couple of days, actually 3 different groups of healthcare providers, different places here in Guam. And in more than one of those places, we were talking about this dynamic, because if you don't realize it, one of the occupational challenges for healthcare providers is lack of sleep. Sometimes they're not sleeping because they're taking care of you or your family members, your loved ones. But when we short ourselves on sleep, there is only one way to keep going. Do you realize this? The only way you can keep going is to ramp up your stress hormones. Really, that's how we keep going. And some people say, well, how do you ramp up your stress hormones? Well, many people get some help in ramping up their stress hormones. It's called caffeine. So caffeine, one of the ways it works is by raising stress hormone levels. But other people ramp up their stress hormone levels without caffeine. They just say, they can just keep going. I just got to keep pushing myself. I feel like sleeping, but the patient needs me. The baby needs me. It's crying at night. I just interviewed on a radio show. Some of you know I host a weekly radio show. It's called American Indian Living. So it's especially themed for Native Americans. But the show that's going to be airing, I think it's next week. My wife, am I right, Sonia? Where's my wife hiding? So we had an author on. The book she wrote was called Twins Times 3. This woman had 3 sets of twins, and she was talking about some of the challenges of motherhood. Okay? So this woman was likely, for a large portion of her children's lives, not getting as much sleep as she would like. Now, the solution is not just to put the children in a soundproof room, let them cry all night. We're not saying that all of these things are modifiable optimally. But if you're shorting yourself on sleep and can do better, this can definitely make a big difference, because when you ramp up those stress hormones, you ramp up insulin resistance, and you can see at the very bottom of this list on the left side, stress is one of those things that makes insulin resistance worse. Then you see tobacco on the list as well. So let's talk about some things that we can do to make a difference. We're going to look at kind of an amazing place to find the solutions, and since, if you hadn't heard already, you heard tonight that I do a lot of work with Native Americans. In addition to hosting the radio show American Indian Living, it goes out on a couple hundred stations, especially in places where there's Native American populations. But I'm constantly rubbing shoulders with people who are doing research on indigenous peoples in the mainland, and really fascinating. Many of you know that people with indigenous bloodlines, like here in Micronesia as well as in the United States mainland, have very high rates of the metabolic syndrome. If you look at the U.S. mainland, you'll find that some of the very highest rates of diabetes are among Native Americans. And this graphic here illustrates that. That red bar is looking at Native Americans in one portion of the U.S. If you look at other data that's been done, it's really quite striking. This is older data. This goes back to the 90s. Even back then, when they looked at Native Americans in the Dakotas, North and South Dakota, Oklahoma, and Arizona, you can see just staggering rates of diabetes in people that should be enjoying the prime of life from 45 to 75. And I think I've pointed out to you, wonderful thing about getting older is your vision of the prime of life continues to change as you get older. It's a really good thing. So don't ever think your best years are behind you. I'm not getting much enthusiasm here, okay? Okay, let me just show you something fascinating, though. So a lot of people say, well, you know, you're talking about a population that has very high rates of diabetes. How are they going to help us learn anything about diabetes prevention? It's really fascinating. We have records in the U.S. that go back over 100 years. One of the tribes that's been largely studied are the Pima Indians who live in the Phoenix area today. So Phoenix, Arizona. The Gila River Indian Reservation is in that region. And back in 1902, we have data going back that far, only one case of diabetes among 4,000 individuals. You say that's very, very low rates, right? 40 years later, a famous diabetes researcher, Dr. Joslin, was there, and he recorded 21 cases of diabetes. Is that a dramatic increase? Yes, it's a dramatic increase. You say, well, it's a 20-fold increase, or if you want to be precise, a 21-fold increase, but still a relatively small percentage of the population. Today, roughly 50% of that population over 35 has diabetes. So how can that be? I mean, have their genes changed? I mean, if you look at it graphically, this is the segment of the Gila River Indian Reservation population that has diabetes. And you can see virtually nothing through the 40s. By the time you get into the 90s, you've got this huge surge in diabetes. So why I'm showing you this data is you may feel that you're cursed by your genetics. You may feel you're cursed by the family that you were born into. But not only is a diagnosis of diabetes or another chronic disease an opportunity to say, I'm going to do something about it, but it's also an opportunity to say, I don't have to be like the rest of the people in my family. Even though I may have a genetic tendency, the lesson from the Pima Indians is, yes, there's evidence that they are genetically predisposed to diabetes, but they didn't have diabetes historically. Let's look at another absolutely amazing study from the journal Diabetes Care. Researchers identified two populations of Pima Indians. Some were those that we've already talked about, living on the Gila River Indian Reservation. But there were other Pima Indians that they found living in Mexico. They did a study comparing these two groups. And what's so fascinating is we know that these are cousins. If you do genetic measurements, they're similar. Genetic indicators, they're similar. They have the same language. And the archaeological and anthropologic research indicates they separated some 700 or 1,000 years ago. If you look, though, at their lifestyle, this is where it gets really interesting. Not by choice, the Native Americans in Arizona are now living in a very densely populated area. They didn't, invite the Europeans to come there and actually divert the water from their agricultural pursuits. It's a whole story. But they're living in a densely populated area. They have much less activity than their cousins who are living in Mexico. But there's more to it. When these researchers analyzed their diet, they found that the Pimas living in Mexico were eating a high fiber diet, over 50 grams a day of fiber. That's a high fiber diet. They were eating a relatively low fat diet. Only about 20% of the calories in the diet were from fat, whereas the Pimas in Arizona were eating a high fat, low fiber diet. When they looked at the consumption of animal products among the Pimas living in Mexico, look at how they described it. Look at the slide. Those of you can read it. How would you describe their diet? They were almost vegetarians, right? They were only eating meat and poultry once every 1 to 2 months. whereas the Pimas in Arizona were consuming large amounts of animal products. The bottom line when the researchers looked at the data was profound differences. Boy, where did these slides come from? Wow. The bottom line, there we go. I knew we could get to it. If you couldn't tell, the first night we were together, we had a clicker that didn't want to click, and we ended up with one that clicks a little bit too good, or maybe a doctor that presses down too heavily. So if that carries over to my foot, you probably will not want to ride in a vehicle with me, okay? Anyway, you'll have to ask my wife about that. But look here at this graph, if you can see it, and if you can't, I'll just tell you what it's showing. It's showing you women of the same age in Mexico and Arizona, both of Pima descent. Roughly 40% of the women in Mexico with diabetes in Arizona with diabetes at a young age, in their 30s. In Mexico, it's only about 1/4 the prevalence, only about 1/4, only about 1 in 10. So they're genetically predisposed, but because of their lifestyle, they're largely protected. With the men, they were looking at a group of men, average age in their late 40s, true in both the Mexican and Arizona Pima men. You can see over half of the Pima men in Arizona had diabetes, only 6% of the men in Mexico. Do you see why we're projecting this? You can have even what some people would label bad genetics, and you can turn back the course with lifestyle. So we gave you an overview earlier. As our time is winding up before we move into the question and answer portion, let me just tell you those slides that many of you read because you're speed readers. You saw that not only can you reverse insulin resistance, you can reverse diabetes and its complications. We had the privilege of working with a number of patients over the years, seeing their diabetic nerve problems improve dramatically. But here's the last slide I want to show you. Not this one, but one more that relates to diet, and it's right here. So this slide basically summarizes things that changed with European contact among Native Americans. These are the keys to avoiding insulin resistance, reversing insulin resistance, and reversing diabetes. Eat less fat, especially animal fat. Increase mineral intake. The best way to do this is eat more plant foods. The real winners when it comes to mineral density, that means minerals per calorie, are plant foods. It's true of magnesium. It's true of potassium. It is even true of calcium. It's not dairy products. If you don't believe me, before you leave, go out and at least look at our book, 30 Days to Natural Blood Pressure Control. In Chapter 5, we actually did all the nutrient analysis. You can see all the top foods in calcium, potassium, and magnesium in the American diet. You'll see they're all plant foods. Okay? There are a few dairy foods that get into the very bottom of the top 15, so I'm not going to say there's no dairy products that get onto that list with calcium, but they're not foods you want to be eating because of their high fat consumption, at least not eating to any great degree. You see next, lower caloric density. That means when you eat foods that have more water and more fiber in them, plant foods in other words, you can fill up on far less calories. This is an advantage both as far as getting the nutrients you need but not packing on the pounds. Glycemic index is a measure of food's tendency to raise blood sugar. Now some of you have been asking me about things like taro and tapioca and breadfruit. Yes. Well, we actually have some data for you. And these foods are actually better choices, especially the taro and the tapioca, better carbohydrate sources than many of the carbohydrate sources that people are using. They're still not as good at stabilizing blood sugar as beans. Beans are one of the best food sources as far as having a low glycemic index and also having fiber that helps to stabilize blood sugar. Then you'll see also on the list temperance principles. Temperance is the idea of eating things, doing things that are good in moderation, but totally avoiding things that are harmful. You see, many people think moderation in everything. Have you heard that mantra? Moderation in all things. Moderation, moderation. This is nonsense, okay? No, really. Do not be moderate in your consumption of strychnine, okay? No, really. Do not be moderate in your consumption of arsenic, okay? Avoid it totally. If something's toxic, avoid it. If something is good, do it, but do it in moderation. Can you exercise too much? Yeah. Not a danger for most of you, but it is possible, okay? And I'm not singling you out. I'm just talking in general. Most audiences that I talk with, the great danger in life is not that they're going to over-exercise. Can you eat too much of a good food? Yes, you still need to be temperate in your eating habits. That's the concept. Fasting, extremely powerful, has a metabolism resetting effect. And our program, the Methuselah Factor, the 30-day program in that book, our free online videos, those all use fasting as part of the regimen. If you have high blood pressure, and I know some of you picked up the book last night, 30 Days to Natural Blood Pressure Control. If you read our chapter on water, you read about water-only fasting and what that can do for your blood pressure. So a lot of great things that happen metabolically when you fast. And then last, there are herbs. There are things that can help you with your blood sugar. There are a number of herbs that can be helpful. If you have questions, we can talk about some of them. But we need to go to your questions right now. So our lights are coming up. Microphones are available. And you actually have the floor, at least for a short while, if you can get your hands on a microphone. Carmen in back has it. By the way, Carmen is also one of the master resource people around. If you're wondering about my talks, I'm giving some other talks over the weekend, and you want to know about those, you talk with Carmen. If you want to know more details about some of the follow-up programs, either go to the table outside or pull Carmen aside. We're looking for a hand. We got a hand here, we've got a hand over there. Help us with the house lights too. If you could bring those up, that'll make it easier to see the people raising their hands. Okay. So here's the microphone coming up to the second row here.
Hi. You
Where's
mentioned
my wife, by the way? I'm going to need help here. Is she hiding out somewhere? Where is Sonia? Sonia, come on, don't hide there. This is where it gets hard and interesting. I need you. Okay. Sneak up however you want to. Okay. Take a running jump and show them your fitness. Sonia's very humble, so I figured she wouldn't do that. Go ahead. What's your question
you
for us?
mentioned intermittent fasting. The way I did it in the past was, the hours that you're asleep counts for when you're not eating, and then when you wake up and somewhere around 1 o'clock you take your first meal and you cut off at about 6 in the evening, and that's it for the day. Is that a good way to do it, or how would you suggest?
So you're saying the first meal you're eating is at 1 or so in the afternoon, and then it's at 6 in the evening?
Yeah, like maybe, I think, maybe like 11, no, it was about 1 o'clock. And then you can eat whatever from 1 o'clock until maybe about 6, and then you shut the stomach down. You don't eat anymore until the next day.
Are you working at night, or are you sleeping at night?
Sleeping at night.
Okay. Well, 2 meals a day is definitely, for most people, better than 3. However, ideally, you would have that first meal a lot earlier in the day and have your last meal earlier as well, because in the morning your body is geared hormonally to burn calories. In the afternoon and evening, it's geared hormonally to store the calories you eat as fat. And so it's usually better to eat both of those meals earlier and then be finished so that everything is digested by the time you go to bed. Then I think we talked about that the other night as well, about how your gut has this housekeeping mechanisms that it does at night only if you're not digesting food when you're sleeping. And you will tend to lose weight much better, easier on that kind of a program where you're finishing your meals earlier. They did a study once. I guess maybe I shouldn't go on so long. Well,
maybe you shouldn't. If you want to know more about this fascinating study, talk with Sonia. And weight loss in all people who didn't eat after 3 p.m. Okay, So we got another hand up. I saw one over there. I see one there.
Sorry.
I'm having some difficulty understanding how high-fat intake works with insulin resistance. A lot of fried foods. I have friends that will go through a gallon of cooking oil in a month. And they are diabetic, but I don't understand the principle of how diabetes, is it something that it covers the cell with, to make insulin resistance?
Well, I think we mentioned this the other night as well, also about how fat, maybe you weren't here though. So when you literally are what you eat. So when you eat food that has saturated fat in it, that saturated fat, which is solid at room temperature, not nearly as flexible, that gets incorporated into every cell of your body, because the linings of all your cells are made mainly of fat, or have a lot of fat in them. So when it's a lot of saturated fat, those cells are stiffer in your body. They're not as flexible. And that's one of the root causes of what he was talking about this evening with the insulin resistance, because the insulin, when it comes to attach to the insulin receptor, it can't attach efficiently because the cell, it's not flexible. So it doesn't attach on as easily. And that's what it's got the root cause of insulin resistance.
Okay, we've got another question. Where are we? Okay, we've got a hand up over here. We've got someone stretching over there. I don't think that's actually a hand. Okay. If you do have your hand up, feel free to raise it high. Go for it.
What herbs help us to lower blood pressure?
Okay. So what herbs help us to lower blood pressure? Blood pressure or blood sugar? Pressure. Okay, so we mentioned last night in the 12th chapter of our book, we have a number of supplements and herbs that help to lower blood pressure. So that's in 30 Days to Natural Blood Pressure Control, and you can get that when you leave tonight, if you didn't pick it up already. Next question? No, I'll tell you a few of them. Okay, one of them that I really like is magnesium. Magnesium has blood pressure lowering effects. It also has diabetes preventive effects. That's not an herb, it's a supplement. One of the herbs we really like is hibiscus tea. So hibiscus has natural blood pressure lowering effects. We talked about coenzyme Q10 last night, but another herb that we like actually a lot, I alluded to in several contexts, but it's psyllium seed and guar gum. These soluble fibers, although they don't have a direct blood pressure lowering effect, they help with insulin metabolism. Insulin resistance is one of the things that contributes to high blood pressure, as does obesity. So those are some good take-home points for you, okay? What other questions do we have?
I don't know it's a question, more of a comment, maybe making an incentive to have more community gardens growing beans and herbs.
I think it's a beautiful idea. I'm sorry, I didn't hear
He referenced community gardens.
Oh, community
Maybe
gardens.
it'll be an incentive for more people
Definitely.
to get involved in garden, and maybe he talked about beans and herbs.
Definitely. No, that's a very good thing. In fact, there are a lot of native communities that are doing this. And it's a wonderful thing because you're getting outdoor exercise, fresh air, you're getting that social support, social connectedness, and you're growing healthy food that is, can be organic, and it's a win-win combination.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that you're catching this vision. And I hope all of you leave tonight saying, how can I connect with other people? What can I do? If you say, I don't need to connect with anyone, I'm doing great, well, they need you. You get it? If you're doing great, most people in this community, because it's like every other community that I visit, there's a lot of people with need, and you have something to offer. Next question.
I've always heard that sleeping after a meal is not good for you, and I try not to do that. Sometimes it's unavoidable. But does sleeping after a meal help contribute to this insulin resistant thing?
Yeah, it's not recommended to sleep or lay down right after a meal. Actually, what's ideal is to get a little bit of of mild exercise. Go for a stroll, a slow walk. You don't want to go out and run a marathon or do something vigorous right after a meal because your stomach and intestines more of your blood is going there to help with the digestive process. So if you pull it away by doing vigorous exercise, that will interfere with digestion. But a moderate exercise, a little bit of, light exercise is very beneficial. It helps to keep your blood sugars from being as high, and it's very helpful as well if you're not laying down. If you lay down right after you eat, it will increase the risk of reflux and heartburn because there's no gravity to help hold the acid and all down in your stomach.
Now, some of you may not have heard about this, but there is one way, one thing that's happening in this community that will decrease the likelihood of you sleeping after an earlier evening meal. Did any of you know that starting on Sunday at the SDA clinic, there's going to be a program at 4 p.m. They're going to serve a light meal. There'll be some exercise. I see some of you saying, come on, Dr. DeRose. I mean, we've heard this so many times. I'm serious, really. Don't let this, if you need a good comprehensive program, sign up for it. How many people have signed up? I'm looking to say, how many people have signed up for this program on Sundays? Not enough. Not enough, okay. Well, that's what I was afraid of. So if you don't need the program, find someone here who looks like they really need it and walk up to them and say, I don't know you, but I think you and I should go to that program together. Okay, next question, please.
Does cinnamon help reduce your sugar, your insulin? I mean, your diabetes?
Yeah, cinnamon does have some blood sugar lowering effects. It's not one of my favorite herbs to use for blood sugar because it does also have some irritant properties. Some people do have problems with it, but it does have some blood sugar lowering effects. I'm going to tell you one other thing because I don't know if it was mentioned tonight because some of you have been getting stressed out with me talking about all these programs and stuff. You guys have been so gracious to us here. We decided that we would do something nice for you tonight. Does this sound good to you? Some of you are looking very skeptically at me. Okay? I'm getting worried about this. But we'll get to the question in just a second. So what we've got is we do, I think we may have sold out of the Methuselah Factor books. If you didn't pick that up, don't wait till the end of the question and answers because there's very few of those if there's still some left. But we do have more of the high blood pressure books. And I know the reality is some of you are not going to go to either of the programs we've been talking about, okay? But here's something, we're going to cut you some slack. If you have already bought one blood pressure book at the list price of $20, or if you buy one tonight for $20, it's on an honor system. If you come up to the desk, you say, we bought a book already for $20, you can buy as many more books as you want for $10 each, okay? And the reason we're doing that is because we want you, really, I'm serious about this, we want you to do something tonight where you're committing yourself to connect with other people. You're going to share that book with someone, and you're going to say, hey, I'm going to be reading through this, why don't you read through it as well, we can talk about it. You on the same page with me? So we're trying to lower the bar as much as we can. Do something. I'm serious. This is why we do live programs. This is why believe me, I mean, it's been nice to visit Guam, but I actually like sleeping in my own bed. I mean, I really do. I would be just as happy to stay home. Well, we've had such a nice time here. Maybe that's not telling you the truth. But you understand my point. It really motivates me to talk with people and to see you catch the vision and then change. What's the question over there?
I was just wondering for people with type 2 or type 1 diabetes, if they feel that their blood sugar is actually feeling really low or hypoglycemic, but when they check it, it's actually very high. What do you recommend they do rather than jump to eating a candy bar because they feel like it's low and they're getting lightheaded, but it's still high?
Yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon. If someone's blood sugar is normally is on average running really high, they will feel hypoglycemic when their blood sugar is still in the high range. It's what a normal person without diabetes would not have any symptoms actually, or maybe having symptoms of high blood sugar. So that is very true. And if you can get them to eat something not a candy bar, not something just sugary, but maybe some a piece of bread and peanut butter, something that has more staying power. That's going to, it's not going to make their sugar peak even higher. That could be better.
Yeah, Sonia's giving you the gentle approach, okay? The more austere approach is to say, just get used to it. And you say, boy, I'm going to see Dr. Sonia, not you. Well, here's what I'm getting at. Let me give you a practical scenario. If someone's blood sugars are running 350 all the time, and they get down to 200, their body's going to say this is abnormal, and they may feel hypoglycemic. But the solution is not to keep your blood sugars up in the 300s. It's to get used to having blood sugars that are 200 and below. So when we work with people, part of it is educating them to optimize their blood sugar and not just necessarily treating it. But having said all that, Sonia is a much nicer person than I am, and we don't want any of our patients to stop seeing us because we think we're so mean. So if you're going to use something, like she said, use something that's not going to really overshoot the blood sugar, and that's true with most any low sugar, even if it really is in the hypoglycemic range. Unless your blood sugar is just plummeting, most people overtreat low blood sugars, most diabetic patients. I mean, they'll eat 3 candy bars and have a glass of orange juice, and yeah, they were 50, but an hour later they're 320. So one thing that can help is do something safe that's light activity in addition to having, like some bread with peanut butter or a slice of apple along with it, especially if you just didn't take, triple the insulin you were supposed to and your blood sugar's just, bottoming out. Many times blood sugar isn't falling that rapidly, and people, if they eat so much that they don't stop eating the calories until the symptoms go away, many of the symptoms of hypoglycemia are your body's response to it. The shaking, the sweating, that's not low blood sugar. That's your body trying to raise your sugar. Don't keep eating until you stop shaking. Eat a little bit and then sit in place and move your legs up and down, do something that kind of dissipates those stress hormones without loading up on the calories. Okay, next question.
Hi, Dr. DeRose. I did buy your book the other night, but I didn't get a receipt. Is my testimony that I bought it?
Okay, so I am so encouraged by this question. So this guy's a fast learner. He said this is an opportunity to get some books for my friends. He said you bought the 30 Days to Natural Blood Pressure?
No, the other one, the Methuselah.
Oh, the Methuselah Factor. Well, the deal is if you bought a 30 Days to Natural Blood Pressure control book, you get all, for $20, you get as many more as you want of that title for $10.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's how it works.
But I have another question.
But it's on an honor system if you don't have to have a receipt. Okay, go ahead.
I have a real question. This one is the fact that if you are following the diet, right, and then your blood pressure gets to normal, or 112 ideally, how does the doctor determine how to wean you off those blood pressure medications? When does it tell you you don't need it? Is there some kind of magic formula that you use?
Well, one of the things that's really, really helpful that we are always trying to get our patients to do is to check their blood pressures at home and keep a log of it and bring it into us. Because we just, in the office, we see what it is right then. But we can't tell you what it's running at home. And so if you keep a record of it, then we have a better idea what your pressures are doing on average, and it gives us the information we need to help lower the medications properly.
Yeah, and I typically will start tapering medications. If someone's actively on a good lifestyle program, making changes, we'll start tapering medications when they get consistently below 130, for sure below 120. Okay?
This is the last question. Anybody with a question over here? Raise your hand up real high. Okay. Okay, this is our final question for the evening, Doc. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question about melatonin. As you age, you produce less. So is it okay to take the supplement, or what do you do? Because if you're having problems sleeping and stuff like that.
Well, first of all, I would encourage anyone who's having trouble sleeping to address the other issues that will affect your sleep. Are you getting daily exercise? Are you getting outside in the sunshine in the morning and in the evening? That can help to reset your body clock and help you to sleep. Being in the sunshine in the morning, right after sunrise, helps you go to sleep at night, if I think I'm saying that right. And getting sun exposure right before sunset helps you to sleep through the night. It also helps a lot with readjusting your body clock when you go through time zones. Like we did 17 hours worth of time zone change when we came here. So those things are helpful. And then make sure that you're following other principles. Like I said, the exercise, a healthy diet, all these things. If you are taking melatonin, I'd encourage you to make sure that you're getting it from a vegetarian source. Otherwise, it's coming from the brain of some animal, and that doesn't, sound too. I mean, it's just, to me, it's a little risky.
Yeah, if you already picked up the Methuselah Factor book, we have a whole chapter on melatonin. We also talk about melatonin in the blood pressure book. If those books are sold out, just make a new friend, because someone here is bound to have bought the book, and then you'll fulfill my challenge to connect with someone else. It's time to wind up. As always, Carmen, you get the last word, or you get to repent and give the mic to someone else.
Okay.
Okay.
I really thank you. I bought all your books. And I mastered it already, but I got a question. There's no index in the back, and I want to know what are those little numbers before the resources of information.
Okay. So there is an index in the Methuselah Factor book. So we do have an index in that one that you have in your hand. The blood pressure book, so the smaller one, the Methuselah Factor, that has an index. Okay? So the blood pressure book does not have an index. So you are right. That is a correct observation. And that's why some people like the Kindle version, because electronically it's easy to, to find things. So it's an interesting publishing question. That book is so thick, the blood pressure book. We've talked about it off and on, whether we should come out with another edition with an index. But would you want to pay a little bit more money to have an index? Most people today say that's not a big deal to them. But if it is to you, let me give you my apologies. Okay? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Drs. DeRose, Dr. David and Sonia DeRose. If you want to see them or you want them to sign your book, they'll be outside in just a moment. We're just going to ask you for about 3 or 4 minutes of your time. What is that going to entail? Us talking to Dr. Michael Robinson from the Guam SDA Clinic. He's going to share with us just a few details about the Positive Choices Lifestyle Program that Dr. DeRose has been speaking so highly of this evening.
Thank you, Carmen. I wanted to make sure you knew that there is a follow-up program. Did everyone know that? Okay. There is one. And it's going to be Sunday, 4 o'clock, 4 to 6, weekly. And we'll do it for 6 weeks. Please, as you leave, sign up at the table, the registration out there. It is limited as far as seating, so we do want to make sure that you get on there. At 4 o'clock, you're going to register, and then you're going to walk with us. We're going to be walking around the Guam SDA Clinic, and we'll be spending some time just fellowshipping, connecting, like he said. And then about 5-ish, we're going to have a lecture, and we'll be done by 6. So please come. You'll be glad you came, and don't forget, Sunday, 4 o'clock.
For more information, you can ask the ladies at the table. Remember, Gracelyn Lloyd was up earlier. She mentioned Diabetes Undone. She is going to be near the Diabetes Undone sign, which is located outside. If you have any questions, of course, she'd be more than glad to help you with that. I'm going to do this. I'm really sorry. Now it's time to give away some books, okay? Listen, it's just going to take a minute or two. We're going to draw some names. You have to be present to win. So let's see what we're giving away this evening. Tonight, we're giving away Foods That Heal. Forks Over Knives, that's right. Thank you. The 30-Day Diabetes Miracle Cookbook Eat to Live, the amazing nutrient-rich program for fast and sustained weight loss. And we are giving away 2 of Dr. DeRose's books this evening, so let us see if your name gets drawn this evening. Winner number 1. Let's close the doors. There's more chance for... I'm just kidding. Oh, man. Lucas Swords. Oh, my gosh. Congratulations. Foods That Heal. Congratulations. Okay, let's go mix that up real quick. Okay, next. Mary Kroll. Did she win? You know what, actually, we were going to do this where if somebody won before, we were going to ask them if they would consider. But we did pull their name. So this is going to be the blood pressure book. Okay. Okay, here we go. I want to say Patricia Untalan. Patricia? Patty Untalan? Okay, she's not here. We're going to do this. Okay. All right. Dr. Arakawa. Daphne Sabang. Am I saying that correctly? Sabang? Okay, one more. Here we go. Do you know, I know it's hard during the week. You know, you work the next day. You know, people have, classes they have to take, and so we're just glad that you're saying. Julia Damos. Congratulations. What was it? It was the 30-day diabetes cookbook. Mix it up, dog. Laju Sadwani. Laju, congratulations. Forks Over Knives. You want to watch that. That's incredible. Okay, and we have 2 more books to give away. We have Eat to Live and The Methuselah Factor. And let us see who's going to be taking home this book. Kamlitha! Congratulations! Yeah, oh my God. Okay. Here we go. R.C. Castillo, congratulations! You won a Methuselah Factor. Do you know what, everybody? That's going to conclude our program. That's actually going to conclude this 4-night program. Thank you so much for being here. We hope that it was worth your time. God bless you this evening. This outreach program is presented to you by the Guam SDA Clinic, where your health is our mission. Good night. Drive safe.